Please be aware this will be a spoiler-filled discussion. Hello, and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society, where we're ticking all the boxes and providing the much-needed minority perspective in popular internet discourse. My name's Matty, my pronouns are she, her, and I lead the film discussions.
My name's Joshua. I go by he, him. I lead the music discussions, and you can call me Josh.
So, this week we're doing the first of something I'll be doing every now and again on the older film side of the film discussions, which is what I'll be calling a powwow for now. I'm not really sure how I feel about that name right now. I kind of like it because it sums it up, and that's that we do have a film to talk about. That film is Monsters from 2010, but we're also just going to kind of use that film to talk about other stuff, anything that comes to mind, but mainly the state of monster movies today. Because, of course, Monkey vs. Lizard movie trailer dropped, and, well, the memes are flying. The memes are flying. And I have mentioned before on this podcast that I am a huge monster movie fan, a huge Godzilla fan. We've covered 2 Godzilla movies on this podcast and no Stanley Kubrick movies, which is epic, of course. So yeah, I want to...
2 Godzilla films?
Yeah, we did King of the Monsters and Shin Godzilla.
Oh my god.
It was one episode. Was it one episode? Was that still... Yeah, it was when we were still doing one episode. 2 movies in one episode.
I again forgot. I forgot we did King of the Monsters, my bad.
Yeah, oh my god, that... Well, yeah, if you want to know what we thought of that, go listen to our review, but you'll definitely understand why we forgot about it pretty soon. So, yeah. And yeah, so, like I said, I'm a huge monster movie fan, and I do just love getting a sense of how these films are performing in Hollywood right now. I feel like they are such an indicator of Hollywood's mentality at the moment. So... because if you compare, say, the 1990s Godzilla with Matthew Broderick to the kind of Godzilla movies they're putting out today, actually, you get really interesting results because you end up with situations where it feels like King of the Monsters is more comparable to that 1990s Godzilla film than its predecessor, the 2014 Godzilla movie, directed by Gareth Edwards, which is really weird. So yeah, I just feel like they do produce interesting discussions while also being about something so silly, which I love.
I guess before, I mean, out of curiosity, have you seen the Matthew Broderick Godzilla film?
No, not all the way through. I've seen at this point quite a substantial amount through clips and everything. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've seen it twice. As a kid. I also had a toy of that version of Godzilla that was in that film that looks like a T-Rex.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say I have a weird amount of history with Matthew Broderick's Godzilla. Like, I'm really familiar with it. And I will say, like, in comparing it with the new ones, I think one thing that's very strange about it is it feels like a Gremlins film, but instead of Gremlins, it's Godzilla. In my memory, tonally, it was basically the Gremlins, and the ending is basically the same as how a Gremlins film would end. Do you mind if, I don't want to spoil the ending for anyone who's been hotly anticipating it. But yeah, totally, like, comparing that to the Gareth Edwards Godzilla is something, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. But before we get completely into the monster movie discussion, I wanna talk about Evangelion a little bit because it does, match up with that kind of thing. And as well Hideaki Anno, who also has some history with Godzilla now. And Josh has watched it before, I believe, quite some years ago. But yeah, I just want to kind of like give some opening thoughts. I'm about 7 episodes in, so yeah. Why do you make that noise? Go for it.
it's a weird show where like you don't. Hmm. I didn't realize it was so early, and I apologize because it gets really psycho.
Oh
In my
yeah.
opinion, it becomes a psychological horror by the end of the show, and from my memory, it wasn't exactly that way 7 episodes in. So I
No.
apologize if I spoiled some of that because part of the fun is it's revealing that side of itself. Um, but
No,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
You said that to me years ago. So
Mm,
like the damage is done kind of thing. Years ago, probably before I ever really thought I was gonna watch it. So
mm.
absolutely don't worry.
Because I was
And yeah,
blown away by it when I was watching it. At that age, I think I was like 14 or 15. I think yeah, I must have hit the episode where it switches tone like so
mm,
hard, and I think I just told all my friends about it. Like, you have to watch this
this
show.
is amazing. Yeah, because I mean, Shin Godzilla, the Hideaki Anno Godzilla movie from 2017 does the same thing. Like the first half of that movie, Godzilla's this like wacky chicken duck looking creature, and then it becomes this incredibly thoughtful like portrait of societal trauma from like the Hiroshima bombings in World War
Mm.
Two. He does have a real knack for this, and I think you could make an argument about how like effective that first half is. Personally, I'm quite a big fan of it, but I could see someone making a decent argument against it. But so far for Evangelion, it's really working. Just in terms of, I I really care about all of the characters right now, and you can kind of see the horror in its DNA in terms of like it's very bleak at points. And so when it's a bit more goofy, like the episode I just watched, which is the episode which introduced Asuka,
Right.
uh, it's like kind of a surprise. It is actually kind of a break, but
Yeah.
at the same time, these first 7 episodes have still been quite conventional, I would
Yeah.
say.
I would really on the pod. I would really love to hear your thoughts after finishing the show and end of Evangelion, which is I
Yeah.
think that is like required viewing for the end of the show because
Oh yeah.
like part of the background behind that show is while the manga was quite like subversive and interesting, Anno himself went through well, he's dealt with clinical depression all his life, but in kind of the second half of that show, like in developing, entered some of a very deep depression,
Mhm.
and it drastically changes the tone and writing. Um,
Yeah.
and and it is some of the
Well,
craziest shit. I
well,
don't know. I don't want to say it too much, but
even right now, like Shinji is
mm,
there's a decent part of the show where he is like depressed basically, and you kind
mm,
of have the impression that that's not just because of his current situation. Like the relationship with his father stuff is really messed up. But
yeah.
right now the character I'm fucking with the most and identifying with the most is Katsuragi. Purely because she's another dyed hair. Actually, who knows? Maybe her hair is naturally blue, but
Mhm.
with a beer
It's anime
addiction.
after all.
God, God, she is fantastic, and
Mm.
the show has already done so many wonderful mini arcs that I'm
Mm.
really loving, and I really like the character focus episodes that have happened so far. Yeah, specifically
Mm.
the one with Katsuragi and Rain, which was so touching.
Mm.
And yeah, I think most of all, I'm really looking forward to seeing where the stuff with Shinji's dad goes because
Mm.
he seems, I mean, he's basically like an antagonist or to an extent.
Mm.
Something is up with this dude, and but also there's obviously the element of Rem involved where she obviously is close with
Ray.
him.
Her name is
Oh, is
Ray.
it Ray? Right,
Yeah.
Ray. Yeah, where Ray's close to him. So I don't know. The show it definitely feels like it's moving its chess pieces into place before just executing this one move and like devastating the opponent, which is me. So yeah, I'm really excited to keep going.
Yeah, it sucks because you were saying all that stuff you were enjoying about the show, and I was like, "Yep, I can't say anything."
That's
It will
completely fair.
it will deliver. It will answer your questions. That's all I can say.
And the last thing I'll say about it is fucking hell, the monster design. I love it so much because I just love how they don't make sense. It's incredibly unique. Like, I don't have much of a familiarity with the show or the manga at all in its point, so I'm probably saying some very fundamental stuff about why people love it. But yeah, it really is just a joy to see how they kind of function as monsters every time, and like it kind of that kind of cosmic horror thing as well, where it's like, God, I don't even know what these things are like capable of and why they're capable of that. Like, one of them just shows up and it's just a shape of a diamond. Yeah, it seems to be like purely metallic. It's amazing, and it doesn't make sense to me now, but I feel like the show is going to give me some form of explanation of how these beings came to be and why they are the way that they are. And yeah, I'm just so excited. It's one of those things you start watching, and like I was saying early before we started recording, Josh, like you're just like, oh well, this is a big thing for me now, and it's really nice.
I don't remember what second half of Evangelion is. I can't remember how to differentiate the two anymore. It's all molded into that one.
It definitely seems like that second half is what it's about. It's just putting the characters and the world into that place to get to it, which I really like. Okay, so now let's move on to the powwow of the episode. So like I said, we're going to be talking about Monsters from 2010, directed by Gareth Edwards, who has gone on to direct the Godzilla 2014 reboot, which is an interesting one to talk about. Like, I really do enjoy how immensely polarizing that film is. And of course, Disney's Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So yeah, weird career, but also quite a predictable one of kind of independent filmmaking but just then absorbed by the machine. I think the best thing to do would just be to start off with what Josh thinks of this movie, and then we'll just see where this goes.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant when I start films like this because I don't like have. Okay, so I think about. I said this. I use this metaphor for slasher films, but I think there are certain genres which have pornographic structures, and in a slasher film, the money shot, the sex scenes are when a kill is happening, you know, and in a monster film, the sex scenes are when the monster is doing monstrous things, right?
Yeah.
And it's a pornographic structure in the sense that you came for those scenes, but there are a lot of kind of, talking, dialogue stuff, which are kind of there just to build anticipation. And in a film of what I'm calling a pornographic structure, it's all about building anticipation to the genre scenes that you came for. And with monster films, what I struggle with is I no longer feel that rush of dopamine when the money shots happen. So it's sort of like watching a porno with depictions of sex that don't align with your own orientation. You just don't really feel much.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time it's hard for me. I was worried going into this. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to evaluate it because I can't tap into the kind of person this is made for.
Yeah, and obviously, like, you have a right to an opinion no matter what, but there is some cognitive dissonance of sometimes being like, I just fundamentally cannot engage with what this film is meant to be, and it can feel slightly unfair to the film if you're criticizing it based on that kind of thing. But yeah, like I said, you still get to have an opinion, obviously.
If you're not, if you're a game journalist whose favorite genre is platformers and that's your expertise, and you don't like strategy games, don't review XCOM 2. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
Yeah.
Give it to another journalist who can better interrogate what makes that genre work and whether or not this entry works within that genre. But regardless of my hesitation, I ended up really enjoying this film. I thought it was really fantastic, and I was very happy that I didn't know it was Gareth Edwards before I started, because I don't know if I would have gone in with kind of bad faith. Because I really hate Rogue One. I really dislike that film on a very base level. It makes me feel upset. And I saw Godzilla, the 2014, when it came out, and I don't really remember much from it. All I remember from that film really is the part where his spine lit up and got blue was quite cool.
Oh,
And then there was also another 2 hours of the film that happened where Bryan Cranston and the kid from Kick-Ass did stuff I don't remember. And there's lots of like military imagery in that film, and I guess I would sort of be interested to go back to that and see what they were doing with that imagery. Because coming to Monsters, awful title by the way, I do feel like this is a very political film, and while I do think it holds a tiny bit of ambivalence, and not as in uncaring, but as in it doesn't give a heavy-handed political statement. I do think this film is taking Lovecraftian monster imagery to talk about border anxiety, you know, and America, and given that thematic through line in the film, which I found very satisfying and very very eloquent. I would be really curious to kind of bring in the powwow aspect of this recording and broaden the discussion beyond this film. I would be very curious to go back to the Godzilla film and see what it was actually saying about the US military. I'm very disappointed to see if the studio's dabblings made it say something much more appraisal of the military.
Yeah, I mean, it's a film littered with a structure that couldn't exist without, border restrictions. And the premise of the film, which if you haven't seen it for some reason, and you're listening to this 45-minute long review of it, is essentially that there is a contaminated zone where people are not allowed, but you can pay a lot of money to get through. It's not exactly safe, and you might not make it through to the other side, but you can pay illegally to get through. So already, I mean, yeah, that premise alone
an extremely
loaded,
extremely heavy-handed metaphor.
Yes,
I almost thought it was a bit too much when they showed a map of America, Mexico, and the dead monster zone on the border of that map. Like, do you get it? Yeah. Do you get what the film's about? A bit heavy-handed, but there you go.
No, I know what you mean, and I think in a film with more heavy-handed filmmaking, if that makes sense, it would be a premise that turned my brain off. Yeah, it would be a punch, exactly, where you're kind of like, okay, so it's one of these films, but Edwards practices restraint at pretty much every turn here. And to get into just kind of broad thoughts on the film for me, I didn't get a whole lot out of this one. It's not a film that provoked actually negative reactions in me, but I think one thing that I want to come to in this discussion is I want to understand what this film provoked in you that you enjoyed so much, because I don't know, I felt quite numb watching this. I think there was some really good character stuff with Andrew, the photographer character. I really like how at first, especially given the genre nature of this film, it seems like he's gonna be a sleazeball. Like he's there doing something for a woman he seems a little bit kind of wary of, and he's quite dismissive when he speaks to her at first, and then the way the film negates that is actually really like careful and almost surgical, like, but without. And what I mean by that is it never feels too schmaltzy. Like he even has like an estranged son, and that is avoided from feeling really like hammy and like feel sorry for this character. He has a son kind of thing. You should be worried, as another film from Gareth Edwards does. So yeah, but I got a lot. Yeah, the kick-ass guy. He has a family. You know, and he's a military boy with a family. Like, you know, he's a patriot. We should care about his character, even though I don't think he's shown any personality in the past half an hour. But anyway, yeah, on the woman's side, I got a lot less out of Samantha. Yeah,
Interesting.
I ultimately have very little to say about her character because I don't know. The drama thing with her husband, I like where she's kind of debating whether or not to leave him. It's relatable because I think she does a good job of selling that just she just doesn't care about that relationship anymore, and when you hear her speaking to him and speaking about it, it's just she's just done, and I think that's really well done. But other than that, I can't really say anything about her. And then kind of above all of that, the kind of framework of the film, which is kind of a road movie. You know, they're getting from point A to point B. Obviously, not exactly directly. There are bumps along the way, but I wasn't just it didn't get me in the way that honestly, like in the kind of stupid monkey brain way that monster movies normally do, of just like, oh, that's a cool like premise, you know, like very simplistic, kind of non-character focused. And then on top of that, I didn't really fall in love with the character drama of the film because the monster stuff really is a backdrop, but that does play a massive part in the film's narrative and meaning, but just in terms of screen time, it's not a big deal. But yeah.
Well, this is fantastic because I feel like I feel like this is I'm so excited that I get to see past everyone.
Yeah, what the hell? This is amazing.
Okay, so to start off with the premise stuff, I love the premise of this film. It is like Children of Men light with the characters of like with a Resident Evil 4 mission dynamic of like I have to escort the daughter of the guy I work for.
Yeah.
With the added romance of like Terminator. So these are three things that I like a lot, and was super happy to see the film was just that.
Yeah.
So I really dug the premise. And to get to Samantha and Andrew, the performances that McNary and Abel give, I really enjoyed. I found it very endearing and charming in that they weren't the best actors, and it gave the film a real like indie flavor. And I found that I'm a big fan of, for example, Andrew Bujalski films. He made the film Funny Haha and Mutual Appreciation. Kind of he's kind of seen as one of the originators of mumblecore, you know, which later got all... Yeah.
I was reading about this recently, actually.
Yeah. And mumblecore is one of my favorite genres. You know, sadly, the likes of what's the name of Greta Gerwig's husband?
Noah Baumbach.
Noah Baumbach has kind of driven it to the ground a bit, but even though I loved the film Funny Haha, but you know, anyway, no, Andrew Bujalski's films have a real. He only cast non-actors because he wants to get the most natural feeling deliveries. Mm-hmm. So there's and this film had a similar thing. It's a bit more heightened than a Bujalski film, in which there aren't monsters. But the kind of slightly stiff, slightly awkward, and very very dumbed down deliveries that both of the leads give. I really loved.
Yeah.
Um, I just find that kind of performance very endearing. When you're going for that low key character drama.
Andrew in particular has a really good physicality to him. I really do think that McNary did a very good job at showing his kind of awkwardness, but also just frustration through his body language. I don't know.
Yes.
It's very very tactile, and I really like that.
I like how rugged he was. He felt like you know when he felt so he reminded me a lot of like the book version of Geralt, and it happens from the Witcher series, and it happens a lot with like adaptations where you have YouTube videos of like 10 things that are different in the book than the film, and it's like in the film the main character is super hot, in the book they're described as like not
Kinda
super hot.
gross, yeah.
You know, either they take female characters and slim them down for the films, or take male characters and like make them super fit. And he had this like gruff, normal guy look to him, very tired, which I really dug. And with him and Samantha's storylines, what I liked about them is thematically they're both completely paired up in a very nice way, where other than the broader political context of this film, the border anxiety of it, the personal kind of themes in this film, you know, slightly not apolitical, but you know, further away from that kind of broad political scope, seem to be just about your life feeling empty, and no matter how bad the irony, the great irony of this film is, no matter how bad being out here in the zone with the monsters is, all of their anxieties are wrapped in having to go home and knowing they have to go home to something that's broken and can't really be fixed. Andy has to go home to in a strange relationship with his son, with a mother who won't let him have a real relationship with him, and Samantha has to go home to like a fiance she doesn't love. And I love that the final line, after all of this fuckery you've seen, and finally the troops have come, and there's the mist reveal that, you know, this is more complicated than it seemed. The final line's, "I don't want to go home," and that, I just found that extremely moving.
Yeah, I tonally it plays up as well where when there's not a monster actively attacking them and they're not in mortal peril, the film doesn't actually seem to be trying to create like a particularly uneasy atmosphere or tense atmosphere. It really whether or not it works for you, and I don't think it worked for me because I was a little bored, but it's not trying to. It's meant to feel a little bit like a nice time for these guys, like you were saying. I mean, it kind of peaks with them finding that. I think it's an Aztec pyramid, and
it's
then
like a Linklater film. It's two people who get a break from their horrible lives and just find solace in this like weird, extraordinary time where they get to be together. It's not a monster film.
No, it's not. But I like the characters in Linklater films a lot more. Like, what's Samantha like? Who is she? What's her personality? I don't know. Yeah. Like,
I do agree. She could be a more better fleshed out character.
I think
I'm not saying this is Linklater conversation.
Oh no, not at all.
I'm just pointing out how delightful that I am that this is that kind of film.
Yeah. I am not trying to fault you in any way for liking this. This is a Josh movie because and as I was watching it, I was like, oh yeah, Josh. If he likes the characters, because you're not just sold on the premise of like two characters being together, like you have to actually like engage with the people to like them, to like the story rather. But yeah, I think that was my biggest shortcoming, was in those scenes where nothing was happening. I was just like, oh, this isn't very engaging. And then the monster stuff, I don't know. I found it like weirdly tame and like, not because it doesn't show a whole lot, but I don't know. It just
And I thought it was great. I
the
really
the
like the monster scene, the monster
actually
attack in the middle.
there's a couple that are really good.
It's total. It goes for Lovecraft more than it goes for um classic Godzilla film. And I
Yeah,
really liked it. It went for Lovecraft. It's all about what's implied, and the horror of it. You know, uh, uh, HP Guy has a great video about Lovecraft where he talks
mm,
about an adaptation of a Lovecraft novel where it really the adaptation was like the real cosmic horror is being gay in a homophobic
yeah,
world. Like here, the real cosmic horror is border control,
yeah,
and how difficult it is to get from one place to another. And
yeah,
I think everything this does with its presentation of monsters is in complete subversion. The characters are not scared of the monsters really, because this is the water for them. Um, uh, yeah.
yeah. Oh, I think one monster scene that I really liked was the one in the when they're on the boat quite early on into their journey through the
Mm.
dark zone. I think it's called the infected zone, and yeah, you see you hear like something moving, and you see this kind of weird shape moving through the water, and then it's just a jet plane that had like sunken, but then like you see tentacles come up and like sort of claim the jet. And yeah, you're right, it is really good on that sense of just what the fuck is happening here? Like, why does it need this jet plane? What, like, are these water based animals? I thought they were like from the beginning, that's not the impression we were given at all. It's really cool. And I think, I don't know, it in that in a more conventional monster movie, I would really like these monsters, is what I'm saying. But that's not what this film is. I think like now would be a good time to talk about
Mm.
what Edwards is saying here and what he's saying in Godzilla 2014.
Yeah.
Because depending on how much you remember of that
Yeah.
film,
You'll
but
have to
yeah,
cover more thematic ground in Godzilla 2014. But
yeah,
I think this film is about being American and being desensitized to what America does to the world. Um, One of my favorite conversations in this film, which maybe didn't tell us a super lot about Samantha's character, but I guess if anything, Samantha's meant to act in contrast to Andrew, where Samantha is more naive and wide-eyed.
mm-hmm.
They casted someone who even looks like Cameron Diaz, whereas Andrew's like pretty jaded, pretty jaded. And one of my favorite conversations is when she asks like, how does it feel knowing that you make money off of terrible things happening? And he's like, you mean like a doctor? Um,
Yeah, I love that line.
yeah,
Yeah,
just there's some great stuff in here about the inherent alienation of making a living during a time of tragedy.
yeah,
I make more money off of dead kids. No one wants to see a happy kid, and it's
mm-hmm.
true. That's how currently, that's what capitalism encourages, right?
Yeah,
Um, uh, and then going forward, when the actual monster attack happens, uh, I love I'm a big fan of Lovecraft, so I did love the tentacles and the mist
oh,
imagery. I
amazing.
thought that was
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Uh, but the real horror in that, because that scene, I thought that scene was tense for me, but the real horror is him actually confronting a dead child, and a dead family, and having that moment where he puts the coat over the child and the flowers
mm,
over it, and there's a sense that even though he exists in systems that are inherently alienating, um, and even though, as the plot sets up, these are areas that the America's locked itself off of and is routinely bombing. Um, America is acting in complete self-interest with complete disregard of the lives and towns it ruins, as the film kind of shows. Um, Despite all of that, some humanity can be found when they're like outside of these systems, and
mm-hmm.
that point that the film makes for how dehumanizing systems is and how easy it is. And there's even the line, again, maybe it's a tad heavy-handed, but there is even a line where it's like, America looks different from outside. It looks different from out here. And
Mm-hmm.
next tomorrow, we're going to be back in there in our cozy suburban homes, and we're going to forget all about this. You know, the systems America works with are inherently alienating and dehumanizing, and I think thematically that's what the film's about.
Yeah. No, I think 100%. And I think what this brings us on to is the fact that right now, you have filmmakers like Gareth Edwards, who, regardless of whether or not I like his movie, he is saying something with this film. And then they are entered into the machine of Hollywood. And I really do like it works out very neatly that he has made an independent monster film, or at least relatively independent, and then he has gone on to make, the first American depiction of Godzilla in 20 years, and it was a huge box office event because the thematic statements that are made across both films are really different, and I think also just a lot more simplistic, and it rarely reflects a pattern of these films where it seems so corrupted by influence, like with the release of the trailer for Godzilla vs Kong. I just couldn't help but feel like every element of story, like literally every story element, I was like, I don't think someone like wrote this character and thought, okay, this is the character that will go on this arc. I think it was like, no, we're gonna have an exec said to the screenwriter, okay, so we're gonna have these 7 protagonists, and they're gonna go on these journeys, and you need to just write that. And I think you see the beginning of that in Godzilla 2014, because I remember in that film, there's a whole lot of kind of military, let's say, bumbling, but ultimately, there's the stuff with the nuke, and they're cool. Like, there's that shot. It's an amazing shot, to be fair, where they're like airdropped into the fight between Godzilla and the insect thing. I don't know all their names because I do have a life outside of Godzilla. But yeah, and they're right there with Godzilla, like kind of in the same shot. I can remember it so clearly, with the like red smoke pouring out from their like backpack thing. I'm sure you remember it. It's one of the most memorable shots in the film. And yeah, they're like,
I mean, that was the reason you went and saw the film.
Yeah.
That in the trailer.
Yeah. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem like the same storyteller. Because even if I disagree with what, I don't like the US military. Sorry, Lindsay Ellis. But even if I disagree with like the representation of the US military in Godzilla, like on a artistic level, in terms of like representing things with like nuance and showing a different side to things, that is not the case for Godzilla 2014 as it is in Monsters 2010. And yeah, and that kind of speaks to the wider outlook of Western monster movies, where even when they're going for like lesser things, it just seems like there is absolutely no creative license allowed, and it's so boring.
Yeah, it's tragic because the reason why the production studio of Legendary, hit Gareth Edwards is not because he made this, in my opinion, tender observation about the alienation of America and the reality of border control. It's because he could make quite a competent monster film with quite a
Yeah,
small budget. And they're like, this is the director that will be very efficient and will do what we tell
economical.
him to do and do it well.
Yeah,
That's the reason that they hired him. And ironically, I think, you have a situation where just like the character of Andrew, he himself enters the system where he's completely alienated from his work and
that's
can't
so
say the things he
true.
wants to say, really. I mean, and they don't give you 500 sorry, they don't give you $160 million to make a scathing critique of the military. Like, you do what they fucking tell you to do,
Yeah,
you know? Um,
because
and that's how it works. That's Hollywood.
even within like the film, you can see subplots propping up. Not even subplots, major through lines of the film get literally murdered within it. So the best thing about Godzilla's 2014 in the first half an hour is Bryan Cranston. I don't just say that because I love Breaking Bad, but he carries such gravitas, and the hook of the film is how long have they been covering up knowing about Godzilla? And then he dies in the next scene after confronting them, and the storyline is over. And it is like in screen time watching a producer coming along and like blacking over like script lines and being like, nope, nope, none of that storyline. It doesn't allow for fucking boilerplate monster shit. And like I think next I want to move on to Godzilla King of the Monsters, because what this leads to is the worst fucking bullshit in Hollywood movies, where because they've not allowed directors to like create interesting characters with arcs that you want to see, they just are like, what are we putting instead? Relatable family element, young child who immediately big families will feel sympathetic with, because that's America. And
Yeah.
it just creates this pandering and schmaltzy fucking monstrosity. Like, already in
Yeah.
the King versus Godzilla movie, you have you have Millie Bobby Brown and some weird child that can communicate with King Kong, and it's like, you just don't need this for a lizard punch monkey movie. You don't need this.
And compare that to the type of writing happening in Monsters, where the nuance of it, where when they get past the border, they see a completely destroyed town with no like living life, like living life, no civilization, with mouths and mouths,
Yeah,
and and they realize what happened to the town wasn't the monsters, it was the American military.
yeah,
And that's like the great, and then when the actual ending comes, where you're gonna get the big Godzilla breathes fire and everything scene,
mm,
that you expect, it's just these two weird alien things who like are drawn to electricity, and then drawn to each other, and they rub each other's tentacles for a bit, and then they go on their way. They're completely like they're just creatures, and
yeah,
then this is contrasted with the uh, soldiers from the beginning of the film who return at the end of the film, who are portrayed as kids who are having fun and holding big guns and like
yeah,
can only think through violence, and that is such like a scathing critique compared to what comes in
yeah.
Godzilla 2014.
There's a really good little detail of one of the soldiers singing "Flight." It's not even a little detail. It's pretty head on. But one of the soldiers is humming "Flight of the Valkyries," which is obviously the film from the Charlie Don't Surf scene in Apocalypse Now. So it's like putting itself into the lineage of that
Exactly.
film's like anti-war criticism.
Yeah, and also it's to show that these teenage just soldiers are living out a hero
A
fantasy and being the
fantasy,
soldiers.
yeah,
Like, in the same way that people become cops of a hero fantasy, like the character of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, who becomes a cop because of, what was it, Lethal Weapon? Like,
hmm
it, yeah, it's just, It's really sad to see, in my opinion, monsters which has very sometimes it's heavy-handed, but hey, at least it's there, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
consistent like thematic through line. So it's, in my opinion, well thought out. That just isn't present in the kind of future films that come, and it sucks because the original Godzilla film was born out of that kind of critique of military. You know, it was about the A bomb and everything. So
Yeah, ultimately, I think that is one of the biggest takeaways. Is like I I don't think the West should be making Godzilla movies because God, yeah, Godzilla could be stupid. Like we've all seen the GIF where he's like sliding along on his tail to do a drop kick on Ghidorah, but it was created for a reason and a very sensitive reason that can be seen in Shin Godzilla. And go watch any American Godzilla movie from the past 30 years, and then go and watch Shin Godzilla, and you will see why the West should not be making Godzilla movies. And it's sad to see Gareth Edwards, even though I don't like monsters, it's sad to see Gareth Edwards like have to do that because when you are a director, you don't have many options. You really don't have many options. Uh,
I mean,
and
you work your ass off to make a monster film on like what 100K, and yeah,
yeah,
fuck it, take the Godzilla gig because someone's gonna make it anyway, and that has opened up his career to
exactly.
now he's made it. I mean, I'm not blaming him, I'm blaming the system. He's
Yeah, no, totally. So yeah, and ultimately, I'd give a weak recommend. Ultimately, I'd give Monsters a week, not recommend. Uh, just primarily for all the reasons. It's not a profoundly impacting film, so I get my not recommend won't be profoundly impacting. I just didn't. None of the elements it was going through for really hooked me, and I totally see how that kind of subtlety and like kind of just not being so in your face could be in a way its own hook because it kind of plays up the little details of the characters, and I think that genuinely does work where Andrew's concerned. Like I think I really like how little writing and specifically like dialogue there is put to his character and how much McNary compensates for that. But otherwise, I think it's a film with a lot of things that I respect about it. Like, I really like its social commentary. I really like its treatment of monsters, and I genuinely haven't seen a film treat monsters like this in ages. But none of that ever builds up into any actual emotion for me. So yeah, a week not recommend. Josh, how about you summing all of this up?
yeah, I'm gonna give this a strong recommend, and I agree with you that Japan Godzilla is theirs, and America shouldn't really be making Godzilla films. And what I like about this film is it's not a Godzilla film; it's a Lovecraft film. It's
Hmm.
about, and it uses metaphor in a Lovecraftian way. You know, for Lovecraft, other races is the cosmic horror, and here it's America, this overbearing force in the world and everything that surrounds it. And I see that this film has had a very lukewarm kind of people remember it in a lukewarm way. But I'm happy to look back on when it came out. Yeah, Roger Ebert looked upon it favorably, so I'm happy to know I have good company in liking this film. And I guess one last thing I'll say about, in my opinion, how impactful this film was is the climax of this film, the emotional climax, is when Andrew is on the phone with his kid, and they're just having a normal father-son conversation, and he just starts breaking down and crying and trying to hide the fact that he's crying from this kid, and then the actual monster coming through feels like an afterthought. That is the emotional core of this film. The military come in and fight the monster. It doesn't want you to get off on that, really. It never lets you enjoy fighting these
Hmm.
monsters because instead it highlights how destructive and pointless America's, violence is. So yeah, for all of its subversive writing, I really ended up loving this film, and I'm sad that Gareth Edwards hasn't gone back to make more films like this. And I hope that with the Star Wars money, he feels confident enough to go back and make his own stuff again.
Yeah, hopefully the next time we hear about Gareth Edwards film, it's a studio movie, but it's not but it's its own IP. It's not like a Disney movie, you know. Fingers crossed, because that would be cool. So yeah, what are we going to be talking about next week, Josh?
Awesome. So next week, we're gonna go back in time because tick off the 2020 boxes before we move into
Woo!
2021, which we will begin with a bang, but we're not, reveal that yet. But yeah, next week we're going to be reviewing something different to things we've done in the show before. Chris Stapleton's Starting Over, a contemporary country album. I
Nice one.
didn't want to feel like I was getting predictable, so I tried to
Yeah,
pick something that we really far away from anything we've done before. So that's what we'll be covering next week.
it's good to shake it up. That's our first country review, right?
Mm.
Oh, that's wholesome. Okay, awesome. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, great. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed, give us a like. It really helps us out. And if you want to hear more, hit that subscribe button and follow us wherever you're listening. And our social media is linked down in the description as well at Minority Arts Podcast. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.
Oh, bye everyone.
Every time. Beautiful. It's beautiful.